Tonight we're working on Chapter 13. Chapter 13 is a follow-up chapter to Chapter 12. In Chapter 12, which I have not recorded a video for, it is basically a revisiting of the database concepts that you should have learned in your advanced database class and your intro to programming in database class, depending on the track that you're in. So we're moving into this chapter with the assumption that you at least have some of those basic skills in mind, that you understand basic SQL statements, you understand the construct of a table, relationships, joining things together, primary keys, and things of that nature. So a lot of what we're doing in this chapter is actually pretty much on the simplistic side of things, but really what we're looking to do is get familiar with how databases are brought into Visual Studio projects, and there'll be some little challenges that we will run into. We were talking about a couple of them before class started, but there's also various controls that are built into the .NET environment that allow you to manipulate databases in kind of an elegant and simplistic way through some of the controls that you see here, like the grid view, details view, etc. So let's go ahead and move into the material now. Now, the controls that we're going to look at to begin with really do have their foundations on the fact that they directly connect to the data in the database. So by being able to bring a database into our project and then have those controls be able to directly attach to that data, basically creates a conduit between the code that we write and the web pages that we create and the information that sits behind it. Why do people write database-driven websites? Well, the answer to that is pretty simple. Because if you have the capability to store information in a database, you can do some pretty sophisticated things. In fact, your web applications can behave very much like desktop applications. And you can do things that are much more dynamic and respond directly to like a user's input and controls and behaviors, much more so than you could without. A lot of the stuff that we do on the web, we kind of take for granted. So for example, if you guys jump out on Facebook, and probably some of you have a tab open right now, and think about how Facebook works and when you log in and you're connecting to people, or you have certain friends, or you're making certain posts, where does all that information go, or where does it come from, or how does it all tie together? Well, all of it is being driven by a database. I know that in the old days that Facebook was using MySQL and PHP to run their whole setup. I don't know if that's still the case. They were real famous proponents of it, actually. At this point, I guess they probably have moved on to something a little more sophisticated because of the size of their operation. But still, it is a very much database-driven website. A lot of the things that happen on there would not be possible without a database. Just simply the connections that you forge with people. You know, that requires a database alone. All right, so they talk here about some of the data-driven controls. I'm going to go ahead and open up Visual Studio to get us started. But if you get into your toolbox and you start looking at some of the controls that they have here, and these are all related to data. So these are all built in and pre-configured that allow you to form that conduit basically between your application and the database. Now, I'm going to focus on this control just a little bit before we get to coding. And whenever you see the word list, it's kind of one of those things that maybe you don't think about that much. And when we think about databases, maybe one of the most basic structures you're going to think about is a table. And the table really is a spreadsheet. And that just very simple rows and columns approach is so integral to IT that you see it kind of permeating into a lot of different areas. And really, when you have a table, basically it is a list. And I know that some of you know a little bit about the SharePoint thing that we do here on campus as well. And when you get into that SharePoint environment, you learn that everything you do in that environment is based on lists, which really tells you it's all based on tables, which means it's all based on databases. So that's one of the first things that you do is basically you put in these controls that allow you to display a list. But more importantly, take a look at what that also gives you in the very first column. And that is the capability to go in there to not only look at the data that's in the table or the database, but also to be able to go in and manipulate that data from the interface as well. And because these controls are pre-built, it really saves us a lot of work in having to go through the process of writing code that would query something or edit an entry or delete an entry. If you guys have taken classes like PHP where we do those things completely manually, we write SQL statements to tie to the MySQL database, it's a little bit trickier, especially when you learn that it just takes like one comma or semicolon and the whole statement breaks. So, yeah, believe me, I've been there. It does happen. All right. Number of different controls. The other type of controls are controls that talk about where the data comes from. Now, if you work through Chapter 12, they have you work with SQL Server, whether it's either the Express or the full-blown version. But really, these data concepts do extend to other types of databases, and it's absolutely possible to take Visual Studio applications and tie them into a MySQL database or an Oracle database. It does not have to be a Microsoft database. In fact, there's even kind of like light databases that are built right into Visual Studio. We don't usually teach those because when you get out into the workplace, people use real databases, so you should know how to work with the real ones. And that's kind of our objective here. There are tools that you're going to run into, and I know that we were having that little discussion before class about how Visual Studio versions have changed since the book was printed, and the version that we used originally with this book was Visual Studio 2012. We're now using 2015 in class, and then when you start bringing in the database components, you might get some errors, and we'll show you how to work around those so that you don't have them. And it's nothing to panic about. Please don't reinstall SQL Server because it's not working. You think it's not working. Okay, so don't take that step. All right, another thing here when we're finally working with data that's in the database and controls that interact with that data is we get that capability, and you saw those little column entries that we had that had the edit and delete and the view. This little acronym here that you'll want to learn, and you'll probably learn it many times over, and the acronym is CRUD, and that basically stands for relative to a database application, creating something, retrieving something, updating it, and deleting it. Those are the basic database operations. One of the things that these controls often do for us in this type of an application is eliminate the need for us to manually create those interfaces through code. Not that you couldn't, but why would you if it's done automatically and it works well? But understanding what you're doing is pretty key. All right, this moves us into the first exercise here. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here for just a moment while I get geared up in my folders and ready to work. And we'll be right back. All right, I went ahead and I created a backup version of my work. I have a complete Chapter 11 as a backup here. To be on the safe side, I copied the completed version of 12 from the author's source files and renamed it Site so that I have a clean starting point. And now I'm in Visual Studio, and I'm going to go ahead and open up the website. All right, and it looks like I have it all open. Take my book here and drag it off to the second screen. All right, and we're going to begin our work in the master pages folder, but I'm also going to do a little bit of collapsing of some of these other folders just so I can see things a little bit more clearly. All right, I had paused the video here for a second to field a question, and what I had done is I was asked to see if I could access my database because we're anticipating a couple little problems here, as I mentioned before. So I came into my app data folder and then double-clicked the database, which appears as kind of like this little cylinder shape with a MDF extension on it. And it's trying to do a little bit of work here. It's trying to open up the file, and you see I'm getting this this error message, and it says it's not compatible with the current instance of SQL Server. Okay, so we have to do a little bit of work. Now, they're kind enough to give us a link to follow, and if you wanted, you could actually go to that link and see. I'm not really given much of a choice here other than OK, so I guess I have to say OK. And then let's see what we can do to resolve that issue. You did it. All right, so what we're doing right now.
I went to the website and they gave some tips, and this is the one I chose.
Okay.
It didn't require, it gave all sorts of warnings about if you want to use the database, well, and 2015, you got to do this, and not. So all you do is have to reconnect.
Okay. Right. Now, I have one person here in class that's already walked through figuring out this issue. So what he's suggesting that we do, and I'm going to follow your approach because it is the correct approach, there are provisions, as you were saying, Mark, for making it so that you can use the database in a couple different project types. But we're working in 2015, so for us, really, it only makes sense to keep it working with that version. So we're going to go ahead and we'll modify the connection. You click the Advanced button. All right. And as Mark is saying, I'm not making any changes. I was just kind of glancing through it. But for whatever reason, just mechanically going through this process seems to kind of reinitiate the connection, which is a little strange. And the reason for this, just from a conceptual standpoint, is the project that I'm pulling up from the author's files was done in 2012. So it has that association tied in. But now that it's failed, that it's open, then I come back in and I'm just basically refreshing the connection. In fact, you can click test connection. And it still seems to not work, but I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Yes, and what it's going to do is it's going to actually do the upgrade to the database file now. And then you'll see the little red X went away, and we're OK. So the data will now be available, and you can double check that that's actually the case by kind of expanding some of these and maybe like going into something like one of the tables, and you can just simply do that with a double click. And if you guys have never done this inside of Visual Studio before, you may have an intro to programming, and I'm guessing probably just a little bit if you're like most of our students. But you can come in here and you can actually take a look at, in this case, the table that I'm opening and the structure of that table. And if you guys are familiar with your database stuff, it's not too hard to figure out what's going on here. So they give you both kind of like a graphical view of things, but then they also give us the SQL code that basically creates that table. So you can actually go in there. And if you're really curious, you can go into each one of these little areas here, piece by piece, and take a look at all the stuff. All right. But now it seems that that connection is working just fine. So let's move forward with the next step. So at this point, I anticipate that we shouldn't have any issues like that. Right? Everything will work perfectly. Yeah, that's the hope, right? All right. So let's do what the book says, and what they're asking us to do is to add a new item inside of the Master Pages folder. So I'm going to do a right-click, Add New Item. And what we want to add is a new master page. And this one they want us to call Management Master. All right, make sure we're, oh, good catch. See that? I was almost doing it in Visual Basic. We want that in Visual C#, okay? So it's a good thing I noticed that. And also make sure that we're doing code behind so that it matches up what's in the book. All right, so once you've got those options in place, oh, did I mess it up? All right, let's try that again. Master page, Visual C#, yes, uncheck select a master page. Right. right. And I'm looking at the wording that the book's using, and that's why I skipped over it. It says, make sure it uses your programming language and that it's not based on an existing master page. So it's like if you miss that phrase in the sentence, you'll walk down the same path I did. But thank you for pointing that out. So uncheck that option, code behind, management master, Visual C# master page, and go ahead and click add. All right, and then you can see our new file exists there. All right, so now we're going to go to the code, and we're going to go inside the form element here, and we're going to adjust some of the stuff. So probably the easiest thing to do is to grab the code that they're showing us here and just paste it in, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to take what I have in the book and just do a direct replacement for what already sits inside the form tag, rather than trying to tweak what's there. And then I'm also going to do a highlight here and format. So it should look something like this. Now, one thing that you're going to notice here is, keep in mind this is a new master page, so there's going to actually be a different navigation menu here. And we've actually created a couple of pages that we don't have yet, right? So that's going to be something that we do in the next couple of steps. All right, so now we're going to jump down to the root of our site, and we're going to right-click and add a new folder. And this one's going to be called Management with a capital M. And once you have the folder created, give that a right-click, and then we're going to add a new web form. And they want us to call it default, which it will by default. And it does make a special note here, do not use your custom template. So for the first time in a while, we're not using the base page as a starting point. And then it says make sure that the page is based on the new management master. And of course, we're going to do that by clicking this option, and then we're just going to select it from the next screen. And go ahead and say OK. And then we're going to come into the CP main content area, and we're going to add the bolded code from step 4 on page 458. And just a simple H1 in a paragraph. Then they also want us to give it a title of Planet Rocks, Management, Home. All right, now we're on to step 5. It wants us to create another page inside of Management. So we're going to add another new web form. Same master page, so make sure you got that selected. This one should be called Genres. Select our master, and then let's also give that a title. Once again, they want us to name it Planet Rocks Management Genres. All right, now, since we did a little bit of preliminary database stuff, otherwise we would have run into that problem on this step right here. But since we didn't, we'll be okay. So we are on step 6 now, and in step 6, they want us to come into the app data folder, find the MDF file, which is actually our database, and then give it a double click. And then what this is going to do is it's going to open up the Server Explorer on the side here, where we can actually expand through the database structure like we were kind of demonstrating just a few minutes ago. All right, so they want us to go ahead and do some expanding, of course, right in the spot that I just collapsed. Let's do the steps again. All right, so they want us to expand the database, then the tables node, then drag that genre table from the Database Explorer and drop it in the CP main content area. So right inside here. Well, that was interesting. There we go. Did you guys notice that effect I was getting? It's kind of like a screen driver error of some sort. So I'm just going to bring it here and just let it drop right in. Yeah, the one little thing that I missed here is I was supposed to be in design view. And let's try that again. So let's go ahead. Page has more than one content control. Oh, I see. All right. So yeah, that would be a problem. Let's go back to the page for just a second. And what I'm doing here is I'm doing a series of Control Z's or undos. So now I think I'm back to the point where I'm safe. So at this point, I'm going to go back to design view. Yeah. All right, since I'm kind of getting stuck here because I made an error maneuver, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that page and recreate it. All right, so let's do those steps again. So right-click, we're going to add new item. It's going to be a web form called genres. We're going to select the master page, management master. Now I'm going to switch to design view, and it's still doing the same thing. Yeah, that is very likely. So I'm going to be on pause here for a moment, folks, until I figure out this little issue. So I'll be right back. All right. So I'm guessing that the reason I'm having the issue is because the master page isn't saved. So even though I've populated links and put in a content placeholder section, it's not really properly registering with the other part of the application. So I'm going to go ahead and do a Control S here on the master page. And then hopefully, there we go. Just as simple as that. Okay, so hopefully you guys didn't fumble as much as I did. Maybe you actually read the instructions a little bit closer than I did. All right, so here we are in design view. We can see the CP main content section, and now we're going to take that genre table and we're going to drag and drop it right into the content section and release. All right. Now you can see it took a couple of seconds to do a little bit of work because it is basically forming a connection directly with the database inside the control that we're kind of automatically generating. All right, so that was the completion of step number 7. All right, the next thing they want us to do in step number 8, and we are on page 458, if you're keeping track. They're saying that the Smart Tasks panel should automatically open, but if it doesn't, you should know how to get there at this point. And we're getting a little message here that says if you default to the master page content, everything in this region will be removed from the page. Do you want to continue? So I should answer. It says if you default to the master page content, everything in this region will be removed from the page. So what should I do? Okay, so I'm kind of troubleshooting through this with the class. So we got this little thing, and I think really what we're seeing here is that there's a difference between the two versions of Visual Studio. If you were using 2012, you would get that Smart Task panel would open automatically, and it would give you a list of checkboxes of which fields that you could choose to display. In this version, it's just putting them all out there. And it now is just, saying, if we default, everything in this region will be removed from the page you want to continue. So should I say yes? No, right? I should say no and leave it alone because I think we're just fine. All right. All right. But you got to be careful here too, as was just pointed out to me, that if you click on the table itself, then you do have all the check boxes that they're looking for. And what they do want you to check all the available boxes. So paging, sorting, editing, deleting, and selection. Now, do you notice that as we were making these choices, see how the columns appear and disappear? And these are tools that enable those CRUD operations, basically. Now we're moving on to step 9. It wants us to right-click that management folder, add another item, and this time we're going to choose a web configuration file. So just come up here and type web. And you just start typing, it'll narrow it down for you. It's a lot easier than hunting for it. Of course, we want the C# version. All right, so basically what we're doing is we're creating a web config file now that only is applicable to the management folder. And what I want you to do conceptually here is understand that we're building kind of an admin part of the website. So from the user perspective that's going to be using the application, they're going to have access to the front end of it where they're going to see the results of what the database does. But somewhere on the back end, it's helpful for anybody that's an admin or somebody that takes care of the site to be able to add stuff or change things that the regular user wouldn't be able to. So that's why we're creating a separate one here. There is something we do need to add to this, and basically we're going to add a little pages directive. So I'm going to drop this line in here. I just pulled that right out of step 9. Now, just conceptually what's happening here, with our other versions of the site, we usually default to like one of the themes or the other, and then we have the ability to switch. Now think of it from a management perspective. We don't care, right? We don't have to have a theme. All we need is a web page that works, that allows us to interface with the database, and the users can have the pretty site, and we'll just have the bare bones site that just works, because all we need to do is adjust information. So that's the reason here. I suppose if you wanted to have a theme for the admin portion of it, you sure could, but I wouldn't consider that a necessity in any way, shape, or form. All right, so we're basically done with this section now. So in step 10, they are asking us, and we should probably go ahead and save everything first, to go ahead and bring this up in the browser. So I'm just going to give it a right-click, view in browser. Of course, it comes up on my other screen. And you can see that I have, albeit an ugly interface, it still is an interface that shows us the information that's in the table and gives us links to be able to do CRUD operations. Very little coding involved. In fact, really no coding, just a couple things we copy-pasted, right? All right, now with all the little things that we enabled, you can do things like sorting. So if you click the column headers, you can sort alphabetically. You can also play with some of the other controls. If you click Edit, notice it changes what we see on the screen to the point where I could right? So that's the right category, right? And actually hit the button and it updated. So look at how powerful that is. In a lot of other development frameworks, you would spend a long time coding components or learning how to work with the components that are pre-generated in order to be able to do these things. This is a snap. And it really shows you that it gives you that capability. If you got a database that's already created, you can pull it in, connect it up to an application, and manipulate the data real quickly. Not too hard to do. All right, and if you want to play with some of the controls, please feel free. Notice there's also a paging control in there because it actually scrolls on to a second page. And that finishes that first try it out exercise. Okay, we're now moving on to page 463 for the next try it out. And it wants us to go back to the genre page. So I'm going to close my browser here. I'm going to bring that page up. And they want us to be in design view, which we are. Then they want us to drag and drop a details view control over. So let's get the toolbox open first. I'm going to bring up your toolbox. And then you want to go down to the data section. And then the tool that we want to use is the details view. And let me just see where they want us to put that. Immediately below the grid view. All right, so yeah. Yeah, and that was a little piece of advice someone just gave me here, which was select the table first. Thank you. No, it's quite all right. And then I'm going to grab the details view. I'm just going to drop it down below here. You can see kind of how the cursor pops in there. That's kind of what we want. We want to drop it down into that space. All right. Then next thing they want us to do is open up the Smart Panel. If it didn't open automatically, it did. And we want to hook this up to an existing data source. So click the little drop down here, and we're going to choose, well, our only option here. So now it's connecting to that particular database. And then the other thing that we want to enable here is enable inserting. And that will allow us to add information to the database. All right, so now we're moving on to step 5. And they're giving us a tip here, and it says open the controls properties grid by pressing F4. And that is something that you can do if you want. Remember, you can always right-click it and do a properties. It'll get you really to the same spot. And it says locate in there. Okay, just got to make sure I'm on the right control here. So that is this control. So you should see more stuff than what I had before. And they want us to locate the default mode item, and they want us to switch that to insert. If we don't do that, that insert option that we just flicked won't actually execute. All right. Now they're saying if you jump over to your source code view, you should see code that looks like this, and that tells you that basically you have that connection. Once again, this stuff is all done automatically by virtue of the controls that we're pulling in, and it automates much of it. All right, go ahead, save your work, and go ahead and bring it up in the browser. I'm going to do it without debugging. All right, once again, it's up on my second screen, but now you should be able to see this little item here. And basically what this is allowing us to do is add a new genre and a sort order. So basically we'll be able to name it and give it a sort order, and then we would hit the insert button and it would insert into this structure. That's kind of the objective. All right, so if you want, you can go ahead and actually, put something in. What category should it put in? It's a genre. How about polka music? I didn't see that on the list. And I'll put in a sort order of, I don't know, 7. Think that might be a problem? Did it do it? Maybe, right? How do we find out? Let's sort. And it's not really a problem. What it does is, they both have a sort order of 7, then they go alphabetically. But it did put it in. You see how beautifully simple that was. Okay, so hopefully yours is working too. All right, well, since we're done with that, let's move on. Way at the bottom of page 464, they talk about storing connection strings. Now, this is something, when you start to write applications, you'll recognize this as a construct in any database-driven application. And that is where you actually have a little snippet of code that facilitates the connection between the database and your application. And that information is called a connection string. And the point of it really is that that information gets stored, so every time there's a transaction with the database, you don't have to add that code back in to handle, the interchange. It just exists in the application, it's stored, and it works. Okay, so that's something that you should know about. And those are, in Visual Studio, those things are placed in the web config file. That's the location for it. All right. Next exercise is on page 467, and in this one we're going to be setting up a filter. And once again, we're going to be in the management folder creating a new item. And once again, this is going to be a web form. All right. In C#. This one should be called Reviews. Make sure it's code behind, and then we are going to select the management master page again. And we're going to change the title, as we've been doing. Planet Rocks, Management, Reviews. All right. We're also going to jump over to the master page, the management master. And that was really strange because I popped in here and noticed everything was blank. And you see, I don't know if you guys are seeing this effect on my screen. Stuff's like not scrolling correctly. It's like, I think it's because of all the stuff I have plugged into my machine. It's a little disconcerting, honestly. It's like my screen's not refreshing correctly. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to close that. I'm just going to double click. Okay, that's a little better. Still a little pensive. But they want us to add a link to the reviews file. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy it over from the book. And it'll just basically give us an option to be able to get to that. Control S to save. Back to the reviews page, switch to design mode. And then in the toolbox in the standard category, they want us to pull over a drop-down list. And we're just going to drop that into the content area. And then in the smart panel here, let's make sure that we enable post back. And then go ahead and click the Edit Items link. Let me know if I'm going too fast. I don't want you to miss, some of these steps are kind of detailed. I don't want you to miss them. All right, so enable postback and edit items. They want us to add to this an item called make a selection. So in the text field here, make a selection. We don't want anything in the value area, so I'm going to clear that, because normally that'll just replicate itself down here, and that's not actually what we want. All right, so once you click OK there, it wants us to also choose the data source, which we didn't do yet. And in this case, they actually want us to choose a new data source. All right, and then we get this little dialog that pops up. And we're going to be connecting to a database. But you can see some of the other options that are available here. So there's a lot of different types of data sources that we can tie into, but we're working with databases in this case. Then they want us to leave the ID set exactly as it is, SQL data source 1, and then just go ahead and click OK. All right. Next thing that will happen here, it says, which data connection should your application use to connect to a database? What we're going to do is we're going to actually select the connection string box here, but basically what we're doing is we're going to set up that connection string is our step here. But it wants us to select the connection string that already exists. So if you hit your drop down and choose this one, then you notice that the connection string, and I opened this up on purpose so you can see it, is it has basically a little snippet of text here that just basically points to the fact that it's a local database, and where it attaches, what the name of the file is, and if there's security attached to it, which in this case by default is true. And go ahead and click Next if you've got that in there. They want to make sure that we have this radio button that says specify columns or table from the view. They want to make sure that genre is selected, because that's the table that we're working with. And then it says then select the ID and name columns, and then click order by. Does this sound like SQL to you guys? So you see, basically what we're doing is we're building a SQL statement with a graphical control. So once you start to recognize those things, it really kind of helps take a little bit of the stress off in a way. All right, so then we come into this thing here, and it says, what are we going to sort by? And it wants us choose sort order, and then click OK. Did we do that? Yeah, and I did miss a step. So once you're in this screen here, you want to click Sort Order. I just totally overlooked it. And it'll sort ascending. I think that we can just leave that alone. And it's telling me it should look like the screen that I'm seeing. Yep, and it is. All right, so then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And then notice, the select statement that's generated below. So that looks like, sort of like a regular SQL statement. It's got some square brackets in there, but that's basically what it is. Go ahead and click the Next button. I went ahead and I clicked the test query button here just to see if it is making a connection, and sure enough it is bringing back those columns, right? So we know that there's a connection. And then finally go ahead and click Finish. It will come back to this screen afterwards. And if I'm seeing this correctly, it looks like I have to make a little bit of a tweak here. With the second field, select the data field to display in the drop-down list. We'll display the name as opposed to the ID. And leave the second one alone. That's what the book would like us to do. So this screen should end up looking like that. All right, go ahead and click OK if you're with me. All right. Next thing they want us to do is go to the Properties window. So I'm just making sure that this is selected so we're looking at the correct properties. And then we're going to look for an entry called Append Data Bound Items, and we're going to switch that to True. So thinking about what that means is it is going to allow us to make changes to the data. That's basically what that's going to do. All right, then they want us to switch over to MarkUpView, and it says here that if the static list item that instructs the user to select that does not have a value attribute, add it manually to the empty string. So they have an example in step 10. So what I'm looking for here is right in this spot. With this list item, they want you to add value equals empty quotes. And if you want to do a little bit of a comparison, and that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm looking at the code in step 10 on page 469 and just assuring that it looks like what I have here. And that was the only change I needed to make it all match up. All right, if that work is done, go ahead and click the Save All button. And let's go ahead and look at this new page in the browser. So I'm just going to right-click View in Browser. Once again, here it is on my second screen. And now, instead of having that thing just appear, now we have a drop-down box where we can come in and we can actually choose a category. Of course, I'm going to choose Polka. Who wouldn't, after all? And they should all be ordered inside this list according to the sort order that's available in these other pages. And if you want to see what the sort order is, you can come in here and sort by sort order. So it should be punk, rock, hard rock, grunge. And then if I go back to where I just was, the reviews page, you'll see that that is just the exact same order. So it is ordering by the sort order in this drop-down list. So we are able to go into the database, pull back specific information, have it pre-sorted based upon a SQL thing, and have it display properly in a drop-down box. Okay? All right. We didn't put anything else in here, but at this point, you know, you can kind of guess as to what might happen is you would choose Polka, and then as soon as you click on it, some other stuff would appear on the screen so that you could kind of narrow down the reviews based upon the category that you're working with. All right, that completes that try it out exercise. All right, so now we're on to the bottom of page 470, and we're actually going to get to the point now where we're going to apply the filter that we're trying to trigger off of this page. So let's go ahead and close the browser. And let's go to the reviews page, make sure that's the one that's up, and we want to jump over to Design View. And then it says to drag over a grid view from the data category. And on top of the existing SQL data source control. So this being a SQL data source control and pulling a grid view over will basically tie this grid view to that data. And it's just that simple drag and drop action that allows that to happen. All right, so grid view right on top of the control. And then we get our little panel that opens up here. We want to choose a data source. And they want us to choose new data source. And then from there, click database, just like we did before. And I assume we want to stick with the basic name that's pre-generated. We want to use our existing connection string. If you want to check that it's there, there it is. Go ahead and click next. This time we're going to select the review table. And now we're going to select some columns. All right, and notice that they have a little checkbox here next to an item called asterisk, right? And that basically means to select all the columns. So we're going to select all of them. And they want us to be that way. All right. Now, he's saying here that the author, that is, that he recommends that you don't usually select that, but in this case it's okay to do that. And it says it's okay for this exercise, but we'll see how to fix it later in the chapter. Right. So once we have all those selected, now we're going to click the Where button, and that's going to help us build a query once again. All right. And then they want you to basically match up your screen so it looks like the one on the top of page 471. So for a column, we're going to choose genre ID. Operation will be equal. The source will be control. Then over here on the right-hand side, we're going to use the drop-down list. And I have seemingly redundant ones here. You guys see that? Does anybody else have that? Nobody? Or you guys are just watching and seeing if I'll fail first? All right. So be it. All right, there it is. I'm just choosing one of them. The worst thing that's going to happen is it doesn't work and we have to fix it. Everything else looks the same. Okay, well, how do you like this? At the end of step 5, he says, for some reason, each of your controls may show up twice in the drop-down list. It doesn't matter which you choose. Okay, so thank you, author. Or thank you, Microsoft. Really. Go ahead and click the Add button, and basically what that does is it takes what we just put together and actually puts it together as an expression down here, and you can expand that and see it. Go ahead and click OK once you're done. And then we're back to this screen. So once we've completed that step, go ahead and click Next. Go ahead and click the Test button just to see if something's happening. All right. So it says if you did it correctly, you should get a dialog box that comes up, and you should be able to throw in a value. All right, and they want us to throw in a number here for something we know exists in the table. And I think Polka was set, well, I forget what the ID was. But we know the numbers are basically at the lower end of the scale. So let's just, I'm going to put in the number 7. Oops, 7. And then we're going to say OK. So now it's off talking to the database and hopefully pulling up information. And I was hoping to actually see something a little bit more useful than that, but let's put in a different number and see what comes up. All right, well, it doesn't matter which button you press. So what I did is I put in the number that he suggested in the book, which is the number 2, and I actually did get back results. For a second there, I was a little worried that it wasn't actually working. So that's what it should look like when you finish step 7 correctly. I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. All right, and then you can see how it's pulling in data directly. All right, so let's go ahead and make sure everything is saved. That's probably important. Save all. And then let's right-click Reviews and then bring it up in the browser again. And here it is. Now this time what's going to happen is when you select something from that drop-down list, and I'm going to choose probably, one of these. And I don't know if he's there we go. Just choose one that's actually got stuff entered into it. So I chose this hard rock, and it actually pulled something back. So see that, like, instantaneous data transfer is what we're looking for. So if I come back now and let's maybe switch to rock, that one apparently doesn't have anything in there. Let's try grunge. Techno. There we go. Just so you see that if you're not getting something back, doesn't mean you did something wrong. Just try a different category, because some have data attached to them and some don't. All right, that is the end of that try it out exercise, and at this point in time I've had a request to take a pause, so I'm going to do that so people can get caught up. All right, now that we've finished that one, we're going to move on to the one that starts at the very bottom of 473 and at the top of 474. And we've got a few different tasks that we're going to do here. But let's go ahead, and we're on the reviews page right now. And they want us to open the Smart Tasks panel. And we want to make sure that it's for the right item here. So we want to do the SQL Data Source 2. Configure data source. We already have our connection string, so we don't have to really worry about that. And this time we're going to change a couple of things here. So we are going to stay with reviews, but we're going to only have the columns of ID, title, authorized, and create date time checked. All right. And then we're going to also switch to where, if I'm reading this right. So I'm actually reading it to make sure I do. It says, make sure the SQL statement box also contains the where clause filter that you set up earlier. You may have to set this up again because sometimes it seems to lose this information. That's not very helpful. So go ahead and click where. And I'm assuming we have to recreate that same information. So I'm scrolling back up in the book. So it'll be genre ID equals, the source is control. We're going to use drop-down list. And this stuff all looks okay, so then we'll just go ahead and click add and then say okay. Now you're going to see added here at the bottom. The where clause is now present where it was not present before. So that's really kind of what we were shooting for in that step. All right, the next thing we want to do is click this advanced button. And this is where we can click this little checkbox. And notice how it says generate, insert, update, and delete statements. So now we're not just going to be querying information and just getting a list. we're also going to get all the CRUD operations attached to it. Remember, create, retrieve, update, and destroy. All right, so let's make sure we check that box. Yeah, they're saying leave this one cleared. All right, basically we're just trusting what Visual Studio is doing is really kind of the crux of it. And then just go ahead and click OK on that one. All right, go ahead and click Next. And probably not a bad idea to test the query. And actually, you know what? I think testing the query is going to be a little bit more complicated here, so I'm just going to be trusting and just click Finish. And it's asking us to refresh the fields and the keys for GridView, to which we will say yes. We want to refresh what we're seeing. All right. Now, step number 2, top of page 471, it basically reads like this. It says, at this stage, Visual Studio has created columns for GridView and MarkUpView. And to remove those items and define your own, open the Smart Task panel and then click Edit Columns. So we're clicking the little thing on this one. Click Edit Columns. And then it's going to bring up this little box here that we can work with. And it says it's if the selected fields contains items, use the delete button with the big X to clear the list first. So come in here and get rid of these. And you can probably hold on the control key. Nope, you can only do one at a time. So we're getting rid of those. All right, now up above here in the available fields list, they want us to select authorized. But I want to read this under bound field, not the one under checkbox field. This one, that's the one they want us to check. So you got to scroll up on that list to find it. That's one thing that you need to know. And then go ahead and click Add, and then that'll add it to the list below. And then they want us to repeat the step for the create date time field. So go ahead and do that. And now it should look something like this, what you have up on your screen, hopefully. Okay, we're on to step number 4 now, bottom of page 475. All right, in step 4, it says, in the available fields at the top of the screen, select hyperlink field. Okay, I thought for a second there I missed a step, but apparently not. So they want us to come in here, and we want to find the hyperlink field right here and click Add. Then they want us to take this field here and move it to the top of the list by just simply highlighting it, click on it once to highlight, and then hit the up arrow to move it to the top. Then they want us to use the properties grid to set the following properties as indicated in step 4 on page 475. So the header text will be title. Data navigate URL fields should be ID. This next one should be the following. Yes, you do have to be precise here, so type very carefully. Case matters, syntax matters, and then the data text field, this one, we're going to just set that to title. Now, the key thing here too, and I probably should have mentioned this before I made all those changes here, is make sure that up here in this table, we're applying these properties to the hyperlink field one, not to some other object. That's pretty critical. Yeah, yeah, and I think sometimes that's one of the little flaws with the book, is you have this tendency to kind of, I mean, I do it all the time. I like skim read a lot of stuff, and it's very easy to jump over things. So kind of resist that temptation with this book. All right, so now we're on step number 5. It says, once again, in the available fields list, click Command Field, and there it is. And click the Add button. And then it wants us to set the header text of the item you just inserted to delete. So let's find the header text. And we want to say delete. And then we're looking for the show delete button. There it is. To true. And basically what that's allowing us to do is it's allowing that CRUD operation to happen. It's kind of actually a standard thing in a lot of frameworks when you're doing CRUD stuff, that sometimes delete takes a little extra effort to actually make it work. And that's not because they don't know how to make it work. It's because they want to make sure that you're not accidentally blowing stuff away or giving people that capability when you really didn't intend to. All right. But remember, we're putting together stuff that's, hypothetically going to be, for a management person on the website. So if anybody's going to have the right to delete a review, it should be them. All right. All right, the next thing that we want to do is we want to come over here and then click Authorize in the selected fields list here. And then see this little link down here? It says convert this field into a template field. Go ahead and click that. Next, we're clicking on the Create Date Time column. And then we want to find the property called Data Format String. So let's find that one. And we want to set the property to this. Once again, syntax is important. That's curly brackets with a 0:G. And then once we're done with that last change, go ahead and click OK, and that locks everything into place. Now we're going to switch over to MarkUpView, so let's go to the source code. And we're going to remove a thing called Edit Item Template from within here. So if you see that, it's right here on line 10 on mine. But we want to make sure it's for the authorized field. So, he does give a rationale here. It says the grid view displays reviews only in the read-only mode, so you don't need this particular template. So we're just going to take this, and we are going to delete it. If you wanted to play it on the safe side, like, hey, I wasn't supposed to do that, you could always put comments around it. So that's a possibility. If you guys remember how to do your comment marks. And maybe that's a better choice for you. But do you notice how like some of the stuff inside is still like not really commenting out? That's because that's ASP code. So it still could be seen as active. So while comments would be generally okay, I guess I am going to go ahead and delete it. I don't want to run the risk of like making it break. Okay, but that's the thought. All right, next step, which is step number 10, bottom of page 476. It wants us to go ahead and modify the label control, and it says the one that's in the item template of the authorized field, so it looks like this. So I'm looking for an ASP label tag. I must have scrolled past it already. All right, so that's this one right here. And yeah, right inside the item template is just below right where we were, so that it reads like the one that we see in the book. So the ID is one thing that will change, and that should be changed to authorized label. Run it server, and then we're going to change the code that's inside this field here, inside the text field, and it will end up looking like this when complete. So I'm going to get rid of what's inside there, and actually up through here, and it's going to change to that. That's detailed in step 10, and boy, it doesn't seem to like that, does it? Let's give it a hover. Well, it doesn't exist in the current context, and I'm assuming that that's something we're going to do in the next step, and it sure is, because it's going to be a code thing. All right, so in step 11, we're going to switch over to the code behind view, so I'm going to just expand here and click on the C# file. And then they have a little snippet of code that you're going to add that's going to actually make that little thing that's not being recognized get recognized. So and I don't know if they want us to replace. Okay, so they want us to put this directly after the opening of the public class here. So I'm just grabbing this code. I think I have all of it. Let's see how uncertain I sound about that. And just inside that opening curly bracket, you're going to paste this stuff in. So your code behind file should now look like this. And I'm just doing a little comparison, and I'm probably going to do a little indenting here too. More for my own sake than anything else. All right, and you can probably, just by looking at this and seeing the keyword authorized, so basically if somebody's authenticated, they'll be able to do this. If not, they won't be. One thing I do want to mention is, because of the amount of time that we have in the semester, ideally I would get to the security chapter 2 where we actually start to do passwords and stuff like that, but we just frankly don't have enough time to get there. But if you're curious about how to add that, it's not that hard. So I would encourage you, jump to the security chapter and work on it. Probably spend a couple hours and figure it out. All right, moving on to step 12, which is the last one. Go ahead and click the Save All button. And then go ahead and look at the reviews page once again. So let's right-click, View in Browser. Pull it back over. All right, choose a genre from the drop-down list. Let's choose one I know has got stuff in there. And now notice how stuff is actually got a link in it. Of course, we're getting a thing here. Why is that? Because we're not authorized. That's a kind of default message. And notice that I'm not authorized to change this one. That's why I got the error. But how about this one? Well, I'm getting an error there too. But notice when click on it. Why am I getting an error? Do we have a page called Add Edit Review ASPX? We haven't created it yet. Okay, so that's normal that it's doing that. So it's going to give you an idea that in order to actually do the edits, we're going to create a separate page that's going to enable that capability. Hopefully the create datetime column is showing up just fine too, and it looks like it is. And if you've gotten this far and it's working as mine is working, you've been successful so far. That's all the time we're going to have tonight here in class to code through. I'm hoping I can create another video to code through the rest of the chapter. If not, good luck on your own. I can't promise I'll be able to get the video done. I know it's kind of mean, but it is the reality of things. So with any luck, I'll get one recorded this weekend or sometime next. Then we will be moving into the next chapter the subsequent week. You do have a little bit of time to finish this assignment. So chapter 13 has a good 10 days or so before you have to turn it in. And then we have one more assignment in chapter 14. It's only a 2-pointer. And I was suggesting to people here in class that if you're running out of time with the semester and looming, that might be a good one to use your homework coupon on. And someone here in class did notice that I did not have a homework coupon in the syllabus, which is a mistake. So I will be adding one and re-uploading it. And good luck on your work, folks.